Oh. Oh, we even got a little voice notification. Okay. Tell me when you're ready, Carrie.
Okay, give me just a second. I need
That's
to
good.
properly.
Here, Annika.
You guys, are you doing this Facebook Live through PCEC?
Yes.
So I have to go to their website to do a Facebook Live?
Yeah, but you're here, so you don't need to be on the Facebook Live if you don't want to.
Okay, well.
Should we face? Oh, yeah, if you want it on your computer, you can go to Facebook and watch the Facebook Live. Sorry. So
Okay, I'll try to figure it out. Go ahead, sorry.
You ready? We have to wait.
Oh, right.
Carrie's gonna tell us
The Facebook.
Yeah. Oh, cool. All right. All good?
I think we're just about there. Yep, go ahead.
Awesome. So hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. This is our active transportation case studies by the PCEC summer interns. My name is Stella Davis.
I'm Severn. I'm Annika.
Lean your head in.
I'm Annika.
And we're going to get started. Oh. So over the past few months, we've all been researching different towns to in different parts of the country. One similar to Livingston in Montana, one similar size to Livingston in Idaho, and then one that has a little bit bigger of a population in Georgia. And obviously, we're going to talk about some great things about other cities, but that does by no means mean that we don't like Livingston or that we don't think Livingston is great, because we do. We've lived here our whole lives. We think Livingston is awesome. We're just researching some other cool things that other cities and towns are doing. And so to start, we'll start with Livingston and Livingston's pros and cons.
Okay. So we did this little pros and cons list just to give you all an idea of some of the points we'll be focusing on. So for the pros, Livingston has a great sidewalk system on the southwest side of town. As you go east and north, the connectivity and quality sort of starts to decrease. We have great historical architecture, which really adds to our city's character and makes it one of the reasons, besides the park, that it's a very attractive place for tourists. And Livingston also has the grid street system, which is one of the most conducive to active transportation. And then our cons are the usage of the riverfront. Along the river, we have not fully utilized that space to its full potential. Wayfinding, we have, or lack of wayfinding, we have a lot of cool landmarks and places to see in Livingston, but not a lot of direction about how to get there for tourists and for residents. And we do not have a lot of bicycle lanes or signage or bikeability encouragement. Oops.
Guess we're gonna have to click. It's being annoying. So to start off, this is my portion of the presentation that I curated. I'm going to be speaking about Savannah, Georgia, a cool town. I chose it because I saw a video about it, and I thought they were doing some really cool things, namely their neighborhood style, which is what I will get into basically first after the demographics. Obviously, you can see that it's a little bit different than Livingston. Our density is actually really similar, with Livingston at for about 1,400, which is really similar to Savannah. But the average household income is higher, but their poverty rate is higher. One thing that stands out and is similar to Livingston is that their tourism drives the economy, and the port, which is the waterfront, also drives the economy, and we have the riverfront, which is sort of similar in that. So the Savannah is famous because it's arranged in a ward style with 40 lots, which have houses on them, 4 trust lots which have things like churches and some businesses on them, and then a center lot, which is usually a park. And so you can see the little each tithing. There's a northeast, northwest, And then the trust lots right there. That's just a little cartoon graphic. Here are some real life examples. There's an overhead view from like current day. And then here's the original Oglethorpe plan. It's called the Oglethorpe plan because the governor, James Oglethorpe, created it primarily, or he created it in the 1700s when America was just being discovered or just being colonized heavily. And it was more of protection from southern coming Spanish people and then just outside threats. And so it's more of like a militaristic town, but it has since evolved into a really awesome walkable city in Georgia. So here's another pros and cons list because I like my pros and cons. There's a lot of walkability within the wards of Savannah. As you could see, there's just everything is in one spot. The residential streets are really low traffic just because people don't need to go onto those streets. There's no businesses or anything. So it's super, super safe. The cons, there's not a lot of bike lanes, the wayfinding, there's a disconnect between the wards. And so I'll get into that a little bit later. I did a lot of research into the city's growth policy. And so here's their 5 points that they really, really stress in their growth policy. And something that I really thought was awesome is that they specifically mentioned active transportation in their plan in the 3rd bullet point. Something else, they prioritize quality of life over commuting time. And then the historic building types, I think that's really applicable to Livingston. It preserves community character and helps with tourism. And so active transport, they specifically say downtowns thrive when more people are walking, biking, using small vehicles, taking public transportation, and prioritizing all of these modes first also provides for the greatest economic opportunity for all. So reversing one-way streets is actually super, super helpful economically because it increases property values on these streets when traffic is going both ways. Traffic going both ways also decreases traffic accidents because people are more cautious. They have oncoming traffic heading right towards them. And so they are more likely to go the speed limit and slower. And then they have a vague active transport network design. It is vague, but it is there. It's holding people accountable to doing it eventually. And so there's bike paths with medians and crosswalk extenders and all these great things that make walking in a town and a city more safe and more enjoyable. And then trees are super, super important in places and everywhere, but especially places like Georgia where it's very, very hot. And so to make residents more comfortable, trees are super, super important. They can also help with drain water, with stormwater drainage and stuff like that. Something cool about active transport that I mentioned previously is they don't prioritize driving commute time. They're not going to widen a street or add more streets just to sacrifice a sidewalk, which can be mentally more healthy than being in a car and driving. So this is the vague, though vague, but this is the active transport plan that the city of Savannah, Georgia has put forth as something that they are going to do in the future. There's no date, but as you can see, there are bike lanes and really good connectivity between each of the wards and the places in Savannah, Georgia. So in terms of Livingston, we have a great riverfront, which is, I feel, severely underutilized. We have about less than a mile of riverfront. One time I was at the baseball fields, which if you live in Livingston, you know that they're like 200 feet away from the river. And a man drove up next to me and asked me for directions to the river. And I just told him to drive the other way and he just had no idea. And so some wayfinding to the river, I think would be really important. There's hardly any wayfinding in both Savannah and Livingston, which I feel like could be improved. Savannah's waterfront is an organization. They are dedicated to improving the waterfront. A new waterfront plaza was unveiled in 1977, and they hold events, and it's just a really great draw for tourists to the waterfront. There is a lack of accessibility information on the waterfront in Savannah, but there are shops and benches and boardwalks there. So I feel like we can assume that there is accessibility for those who are blind or those who cannot walk well or at all. And so here is the waterfront. This is the, here, I'm gonna move this just up. This is the side. There's some great shade and some benches for people to sit. And then here are the ferries. So here are my takeaways from Savannah, Georgia. I feel like we could really take inspiration from the river tourism. Obviously, Livingston is not there. Our historical character is not with shops, but they do have 2 miles of oceanfront that is being utilized heavily by tourists and by residents of Savannah. And I feel like we could make Livingston make the river a lot more accessible, possibly bring in Mayor's Landing as more of a spot where people run and spend time similarly to the berm. I think active transport prioritization is super important. Active transport improves the mental health and physical health of people who are participating in it. Policy creation is super, super important because it holds people accountable to creating these policies and bringing them out into action and acting them out. And then neighborhood planning. As I began with the wards were a really, really great neighborhood plan that has worked for hundreds of years now. And I think that going like the neighborhood planning in Livingston, the neighborhood connectivity, sometimes neighborhoods are being created with only sidewalks on one side of the street, or the streets are really, the road itself is really, really wide. And so should we be prioritizing cars over people who are walking? And so I think these are some things that we should think about taking away from Savannah. And here are my works cited.
Okay. The town I chose to research is Miles City, Montana. It is a railroad town in eastern Montana located along the Yellowstone with a very similar population size to Livingston. The first active transportation initiative in Miles City was the Safe Routes to School project. The Miles City Active Living Task Force was an organization that started it, and it began as an education program in the schools, but eventually morphed into a bigger sidewalk project called the Garfield Elementary School Sidewalk Project. And it built sidewalks from the northeastern lower income side of town to the school. And ultimately it connected several neighborhoods, including an underserved one, to 2 essential parts of daily life, which is recreation in parks and education in school. In 2015, Miles City updated their growth policy, and I just took out a few things that I thought were significant. The first thing they did is they listed all of their parks and their functions. So they listed out basically every single green space that they have in the city, and then like who can use it, what types of equipment is there. Mainly they listed like playgrounds, soccer nets, baseball fields, stuff like that. And then I thought something that we should add on if we were to do this type of thing is amenities for accessibility. So not just listing equipment, but also listing like whether there's braille or wheelchair ramps and that kind of thing. And then I pulled out these 3 objectives because I thought they had very strong parallels to Livingston. First, improve access to the Yellowstone River. Second, build an off-street trail loop around Miles City, which I'll talk more about in the next slide. And third, develop pocket parks or community gardens on vacant and underutilized parcels. And this last one is just a really good way to make sure there's green space evenly distributed. So making sure all neighborhoods have a park in their vicinity. So here is their parks and trails plan that shows their objective of having the trail loop that surrounds the city. So you can see in black is the existing off-street paths. So they do not have, or they did not have a large trail network in 2015. And And then in the blue dashed, they have planned off-street paths, so sort of surrounding the black. And then the rest of it, the green and the orange, are called conceptual routes. And so they are not planned and have not been evaluated for their feasibility. But I think this type of map, although it's not like a concrete plan, can be really great for just like envisioning what citizens of a city want. And then here, this is a very rough draft from 2012 of a trails plan for Livingston. It is not like a official or final document in any way, but it was the most concrete thing I could find as an example. So mostly I want to look at the green number 2 and all the space along the river. So you can see in the solid green line that that is already existing trail, and then in the green dotted line, that's what is a planned trail. And yeah, so I think that dotted line from, where is it, the baseball fields to Mayor's Landing, I believe, is a really great opportunity to start utilizing our riverfront more. And then you can also see that the connectivity in this plan isn't as strong as it is in the Miles City growth policy one. And I think that's partly because this is not a conceptual map, but I think that connectivity, especially trails surrounding the entire city, is something to take into account. In 2017, Miles City wrote a transportation plan. They prioritized sidewalk connectivity. They also recognize that there are no on-street bicycle facilities in Miles City, and their solution was super cheap and easy, just to put paint and signs up. And so signs and paint are also a good way to do like a trial of a bike route, because paint wears off and signs can be removed. And then they also talked about how the trail network in the growth policy had not been evaluated. And so that is one of the reasons that a lot of the plans in the growth policy have not been followed through with. And then I took out this quote: Miles City desires to create accessible sidewalks that link the north and south sides of the community that include upgrades to curb ramps. And there's a map sort of showing more in detail about that I'll talk about in the next slide. And then they came up with a couple programs. The first one that I thought we could do in Livingston is a 5-minute dismissal delay for schools, which means that the people who walked and biked and used active transportation to get to schools get out 5 minutes earlier than everyone else, so they could sort of get out before the traffic. And then also snow removal programs. They said that a really easy way to do this would be to just coordinate volunteers to shovel snow outside of senior centers, and then elderly citizens' houses, and then people with disabilities who may like request to have snow shoveled outside their houses. And then here is the map talking about sidewalk connectivity. So you can see the railroad goes right down the middle, and there's the north and the south side. All of the colored boxes are neighborhood projects. So they divided it up into neighborhoods to make the sidewalk projects smaller. And then within the boxes, the red lines are the sidewalk projects themselves, where sidewalks need to be built in the first place or updated. And I think the dividing into neighborhoods was really interesting, because it also sort of lays out how the neighborhoods can now have more connectivity between each other. My takeaways for Livingston are, one, the connectivity in the trail plan. We can illustrate that using a more visionary map, even if our planned trails are not a completely connected network. Just to envision more connectivity, we can use that conceptual map idea. The identification of neighborhoods in the last slide to improve connectivity within neighborhoods, and especially between neighborhoods. And then also between neighborhoods and those essential parts of daily life, like parks and schools and work and stuff like that. The list of parks and green space and all their functions, including who is able to use them and making sure that they are accessible to everyone. So making sure they all have the right amenities for disabilities. Another one of my takeaways is to improve access to Yellowstone. And I think right now we have a couple great accesses in town. We have 9th Street, which people mostly use for like biking and on foot recreation to get there, and swimming and floating. People don't like put in, there's not a lot of car traffic there. And then contrastly, Mayor's Landing has a lot of car traffic, as well as on foot traffic, but it is not as much of a swimming area, which is, I think it's great that we have those two very different accesses, but I think 9th Street is not accessible to everyone. It's like pretty steep and rocky to get down to the river. And then similarly on the trail that goes past the farmer's market, it's really hard to get down to the river if you're not limber and healthy, because of how steep and rocky it is. And so if this potential trail from the baseball fields to Mayor's Landing is built, which I think it definitely should be, I think it's very important to take into account accessibility and making sure everyone can get down to the river. And then one of my biggest struggles with this project was that there was no clear implementation of Miles City's plans. So it's very hard to figure out if they followed through with any of the plans in the growth policy and the transportation plan. So I think the biggest thing Livingston can take away from this is that they need to like write about and publish and talk about and celebrate all the successes we have with following through with our plans.
All right, I researched Sandpoint, Idaho, which you may recognize that name. It's kind of seen as like the poster child for walkability. They're super similar. How come that's not working? I don't know. Oh, got it. They're super similar to Livingston in terms of population size and like relative location to like the mountains and a waterfront. And then also their main, the main part of their economy is tourism. So just super similar all around. And even in like the facilities they have in town, the windows are making it not. No, it's fine. Like they have a super similar amount of parks and like sports facilities, super similar to we do. And in 2020, they did an evaluation of their parks department, and it's pretty similar to ours, where they think they're like well maintained and there's a good amount, but have some problems with it, like structure updates and inconsistent signage. So they do recognize that they have some problems with the parks and rec that they do have. But they did say in their evaluation that they did a good job at celebrating the water and opportunities to increase views and access, which is really cool. So it seems like Sandpoint would have the same amount of like walkability as we do, since they're so incredibly similar, but that we're seen as like an okay town in walkability, and they're like the poster child, someone everyone talks about when they talk about walkability. I think one of the biggest reasons is because they themselves say that they're going to be a town for pedestrians and a town for walking and biking. This is like one of the first things you see when you drive into Sandpoint. So just super simple signage like that is a really good way to let people understand that we would be a walkable town. And then another big thing they do, is that gonna work? Well, is infrastructure. Super like simple and cheap infrastructure. In the downtown plan that they did in 2012, they were like completely revitalizing their downtown, and they designed the streets around like businesses that were on that street. So if it was like retail or if it was an office building, they would decide if they needed wider sidewalks or off-street parking or parallel parking. So making sure that not only the streets are being planned out for which businesses, but the sidewalks and all of that infrastructure. And then they also decided to have lots of signage, like bike lanes, pedestrian signs, like just simple paint on the street works really well. And then like they said they wanted it to be whimsical and welcoming, which I think is a really cool way to get people to walk and bike. If they see things they like on the street, people are going to walk. And then they also allowed businesses to do like little seasonal like outdoor seating and stuff like that, extending into the street even sometimes. So it's really putting pedestrians into focus and not cars downtown, which is really cool. And they just made sure they had usable benches and efficient lighting, bicycle parking, and they made sure to include public art. So they have like murals on plain walls, and they even painted like trash cans. So just doing like super cheap and easy infrastructure to get people to want to be outside. And then another big part of their downtown plan and something that they implemented was greenery in the streets. And not only does it like make a street more welcoming, but trees allow for shade and better air quality. And then they also had the trees and planters in their downtown plan as part of the plan for stormwater systems. It was like their big fix for stormwater. So like even implementing greenery as a system in downtown, it's really cool. And then they also were very specific with the kind of planters they have. They have a similar thing to Livingston where they don't want trees in specific areas because they will obstruct the view, but they still put greenery in those places like planter boxes, and just had a height limit, and we don't really have any greenery in our downtown. And then they also provided more than one species of tree and made sure it didn't have excess leaves or fruit, so they're super easy to maintain. And then this is their downtown. You can see that it really seems like people feel more comfortable walking than driving through, and they have that big sidewalk and the trees lining the streets. And then here's a mural in Sandpoint that they have. I have a feeling it's going to go at some point.
Is that the right one?
I think so.
Okay.
Another big part of designing Sandpoint to be walkable was their focus on the waterfront. They wanted people to be able to access it easily. So they have a pedestrian bridge leading from downtown to this park right on Lake Pend Oreille. And then they have two really big and easily accessible parks, like actually on the waterfront. And a big part of the infrastructure they put downtown and in streets neighboring downtown was wayfinding to the lake, pointing it out and making it the focal point of Sandpoint. And then they also guided people to things like the ski hills that are just like a couple miles outside of town, and even hiking trails that start in Sandpoint and go up to views above it. So pointing people to outdoor access spots all around Sandpoint. And then the Long Bridge is really cool. It's I think like 2 miles across Lake Pend Oreille, and it connects to a neighboring town. But they have this huge pedestrian place on the bridge where people walk and bike, and it's like one of the biggest trails used in Sandpoint. And like people use it to commute. It's very cool. And then this is just their grid system. The Long Bridge is going south, and they have grid system and not a big highway going through the middle of their downtown, which is very cool. Go. Nope.
Gotta do it twice.
So my recommendations for Livingston from Sandpoint is wayfinding. Like Stella and Sev mentioned, giving guidance to the lake, making sure people know about it, know where to go, and can access it safely and easily. And then super simple infrastructure like bike parking lanes, and bike parking and bike lane signs in the streets. And then directing people to the waterfront from downtown, and then wider and better designed sidewalks, making sure they make sense with the big businesses that are there, and put pedestrians first before cars, and then making those streets welcoming and make sure people want to be there with greenery and seasonal parklets, public art, usable amenities, and good lighting, and make it feel clean with trees that won't have a lot of seeds and stuff like that. And then a big thing is access to public land, making sure people know where the trails, the water, and the parks and the ski hills are, because we have all of those. We have access to all of those too, but it doesn't seem like it when you're in Livingston because there's no direction to there. And making sure the trails are usable and useful and there's easy access to them. Like the Long Bridge is super cool because people even use it to commute. And we have the Highway 89 trail and it only goes out to Old Yellowstone Trail. And then Old Yellowstone Trail is like a dirt road that's people drive super fast on. So making those more accessible to bikers and walkers, people would even like go all the way out in the valley if they wanted to, if there was access to that. And those are my references.
All right, so we are at the conclusion of our presentation. So we have 3 big recommendations that we pulled from all of our presentations. And so the first one is that good goals and documents are only the beginning. So we have to be facilitating opportunities for collaboration, and getting it in writing across many documents is so important because it just holds people accountable. If there's new people elected to certain positions that are supposed to be carrying out like a bike trail plan, then the new person elected needs to have that piece of document holding them accountable for the thing that people wanted them to do.
The second big takeaway is to highlight the resources we do have, for example, the river, also public lands, and to celebrate these places. And the Wishberry Hollow sort of art exhibit was a really good example of this. It really drew people to that place and helped people slow down and look at it. And then another way to highlight the resources is wayfinding. We've touched on that a lot, so I won't beat it to death.
The last thing is activating public spaces, making sure our downtown and our neighborhoods, the east side and the west side and the north side and the south side, are places people want to be. And there's super easy and cheap fixes to that, like trash can art. It's something even the high school would do, or like murals on that on the wall of Will Coxon's that's just completely white. Getting the high school art students to like paint a mural on there would be really cool. And then getting greenery in the streets. We have really nice greenery in neighborhoods, but downtown there's absolutely nothing and it kind of just feels stale. Getting like planter boxes, even making it part of a stormwater system would be really cool. And then just having all around good amenities for people to want to be on the sidewalks.
The end. So thanks for listening to our presentation. Does anyone have any questions?
That was a great presentation.
Thank you.
Hard to know where to start. We could probably have a 3-hour conversation about this stuff, but
I know there's a lot of information.
there's a lot of stuff there, and it's really neat to see the diversity of communities. Sandpoint was an interesting case in that they could do a lot of things because they had a lot of money from Superfund cleanup, because they have a Superfund site in Coeur d'Alene River and the lake. So they had a lot of resources, and it's a fairly high income community too, but that's not to say we can't follow a lot of what they've done. So and I was just kind of curious, in terms of river access, I don't know if you're aware, but there used to be, and probably still is in terms of infrastructure, a river access between 9th Street and what used to be an old apartment building. And the problem is that it became unusable as a fishing access when the river channel, when things changed there, and the main channel turned out to be the southern one instead of the northern one. And that happened about, 15 years ago.
Is that where the old clinic used to be?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think the access is still there. So
Yeah,
it might be worth seeing how usable it is and whether it can be improved.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the idea of bike routes in town and highlighting the need to share those. And, you know, I don't know if you know, we had some sharrows painted in a couple of places several years ago. They wore off with traffic and they weren't ever replaced or repainted. But I wonder if it might be possible to accomplish the same thing by posting about, you know, 12 or 14 yellow signs, sort of like the school crossing signs,
Yeah.
the pedestrian crossing signs that basically have like a bike logo and something like share the streets or something like that. And
Yeah.
if you had enough of those around, I think people would get the idea, especially since a lot of our traffic this time of year is visitors. So,
Yeah, definitely.
but good work. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, I just want to say thank you so much for the excellent presentation and for all the work you guys have done. It's really exciting, and I think you've laid out a lot of really awesome potential opportunities for our community. What do you guys think about the opportunity to work more with the high school to get some of these things done?
So I was actually planning on possibly bringing active transport into a independent study that I'm going to do next semester. Some possible ideas, something that I like kind of thought of was during Earth Week or just sometime try to do an active transport day or an active transport week where we try to remove as many cars from the parking lot as possible, whether that be people in the valley carpooling together or and people in town biking to school, and like possibly creating some sort of reward if there's like less than a certain number of cars in the parking lot. But also I would just like to do some research on things that we could do in the schools to make kids want to bike more, because I certainly would like to bike to school more. Sometimes I lose motivation, so it'd be cool to see what kind of motivation I could think of to encourage people to bike or walk to school more, because Livingston, everything in Livingston is basically a 1 mile radius. A lot of people live less than 2 miles from the school, and living on the hill makes it seem a lot farther. And I understand that, like, it does seem a lot farther, but I feel like there are some opportunities in making Livingston more helping people bike more and walk more to the high school specifically, and also all of the other schools. We actually just drafted a survey and a newsletter about the active transport in our community and how many kids in our school district are walking and biking to school, whether that be with their parents or by themselves. And so hopefully we'll get a better idea of our school district and active transportation in the future.
I'm making my lunch. That's all very exciting.
I just word vomited for a little bit, so sorry.
No, I love
More
it.
concise.
No, it's perfect. I want to say thanks. I saw we had Steve Caldwell from the county and Shannon Holmes from the city on.
Mhm.
You both for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity. This is a great project.
I think it was a wonderful presentation, and I would love to actually sit down with the three of you and go over all of your ideas and talk to you a little bit about how our operation, maintenance, and funding from the city perspective would go with each of your recommendations. I love your creativity. I love your research into other communities, and I will tell you that Livingston's biggest challenge in this area is really our funding, and
Yeah.
we would love to have some resort tax or alternate funding options for Livingston to really put into our parks, trails, active transportation network. So I have your emails, and I would love to set up a time where even we could sit down for an hour or two, and I'd love to give you what we have in our strategic plan and planning for these sort of improvements, and certainly want to invite you to be a part of presenting the active transportation plan that we hope to see a draft next month, ultimately to the city commission, and have your opinion put in when we present that to the city commission.
That'd be awesome.
Thank you.
So thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you.
Hey, Carrie, I just got a text from somebody who's on the Zoom or no, not on the Zoom, but watching live on Facebook. Can you see if there's questions there?
Oh, let me check. Hold on just a second.
We're so
See.
I can also try to get it, so hang on.
I'm gonna see if
Yeah, 'cause I don't know how to-
I'm trying to get in there.
Yeah, they are.
I don't see any questions on the Facebook, but let me look one more.
Okay, well, it's our city commissioner, Darrell, and principal, Darrell Hoagland, who's, so I asked her if she could send me her
Oh,
question.
perfect. Yes, that would be great because I don't see anything in the comments. Oh, here we go. Can you all still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Darrell says, nice job. I may have missed this part of the presentation, but what are some of your ideas for downtown landscaping? Does the plan include bump outs in town?
That's your room, right?
I didn't research anything about bump outs in Sandpoint. It's more like planning the like comparison to streets and sidewalks, how much of the space there will be sidewalks and how much will be streets in comparison to what businesses are there, whether they be like retail or office buildings. And then I also read a lot about signage in like on sidewalks and paint in the streets.
Are bump outs curb extensions? Okay. The greenery.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, and Annika, didn't you talk about something about some sort of planter boxes that were part of the stormwater drainage potentially?
Yeah, in their downtown plan in 2012, their stormwater system was planter boxes and trees in specific places where they wouldn't obstruct the view. And they made sure to have that in like every part of their downtown streets and like the neighboring streets in downtown. And they just did like a height limit for planter boxes and then limit on what kind of species of trees. So they're easy to maintain where they did have trees, and they were the main stormwater system downtown in Sandpoint.
I think that that's all of the questions I see in the comments on Facebook.
Anyone here in person? Would anyone like to ask a question here? No pressure. Well,
I did see Darrell sent me that she a couple more questions, like does the plan asking about bump outs, and then she invited you to present to the city if you're interested. To a city commission.
yeah, we were hoping to to get to that point. So that'd be awesome. We'll probably have to make our presentation a little bit more concise, but a little shorter, but we'd love to. I want to get it's not working.
kids do you think are walking and biking?
Like a percentage?
Does it trend to like what percentage, or does it trend towards certain ages or certain characteristics that?
It definitely.
So, yeah, so Sarah just asked, for everyone who couldn't hear, if like the percentage of people we think are walking and biking to school, and if it tends to trend in a specific way, whether that be age or something. So
It definitely trends towards like at least at the high school, 9th and 10th graders who don't have their driver's license. They walk and bike more. But like in general, it's a low percentage. I'd say like less than 10.
10%.
10% of people
10
walk and bike.
Yeah, I was like 10 people would even be.
Oh.
Yeah, I would say less than 10% of the 450 students that we have here at Park High walk or bike. A lot of people who don't have their driver's license, their parents drive them to school. That's not to say that there aren't people who are carpooling though, with people who can drive, or high school students who can drive. I know that a member of like my sister, she drove with people. She doesn't have her driver's license, but she got rides from her friends to school when I couldn't drive her, or I was biking to school that day. So yeah, sorry.
People in our high school definitely prefer to be in a car getting to school. If there's any way they can avoid walking or biking, they usually do. There's like usually, I would say like 20 to 30 bikes outside the school every morning, which is a good amount. But when you think about how many students there are in our school, it's not a lot.
So to follow up to that question, why do you think people don't bike or walk to school?
It's early in the morning. People are somewhat lazy.
Can you repeat the question for them?
Yeah. So he asked what the reason that people don't walk or that people like to be in cars.
I think it's early in the morning. People don't want to like get up and be active that early in the morning. And it's just like laziness too. I know sometimes I'll drive in like the colder days because I don't want to be outside at 7:30 in the morning when it's freezing. And then I think some people who live across the tracks, it's feeling unsafe crossing the tracks in the morning because there's so much traffic there. And a lot of people have like after school activities that they have to get to quickly. So I think a lot of people drive in the morning so they can have like simplicity after school and getting to where they need to go.
And I also think that there is some sort of a stigma attached with like, if you aren't driving. I think driving has this air of coolness because you're a high schooler, you just got your license, you're going to drive to school, you're going to drive all your friends to school. So I think there's an element of how cool can you be with getting to school.
Well, would you guys say that 10% of the people that work in Livingston like to work?
He asked if 10% of people in Livingston walk and bike to work, and if 90% drive, correct? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe less.
It says yes, 12%, I think, but you look at the census data. It's higher than the national average.
Oh, cool. Nice.
I think 10% of that is walking, and another 2% is like, if I remember correctly. I'm remembering that off the top of my head, so that may not be correct. It's in our growth.
That's pretty cool.
My dad works at the hospital and he has to wear like dress clothes to work every day. And everyone says they always see him on his cruiser bike with his like briefcase slung across his shoulder, biking on the on Park Street on the highway to get to the hospital. So some people do it.
Mhm.
Miss J does.
Ooh, go Miss J.
Except when you take your moped.
A lot of questions, but to be continued part 2.
To be continued part 2.
Yeah.
Well, thanks everyone so much for coming. It's great to see you all. Oh. Michelle's screaming or something. I think we're gonna go ahead and end the Zoom and break until our next meeting. But thanks so much for coming. We'll see everyone in the community. So bye.
Thank you.
Good job, you guys.
Bye, Erin. Oh, stop the share and then.